What's going on YouTube? WestHobbiesRC. So today we are back with a Nitro V-Bar setup. So we have my SAB Raw 580 Nitro here, and we just converted it to V-Bar. So in this video, we're gonna go over the complete setup from start to finish, the governor setup, everything that you need to know. So hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Let's get started. So the first thing I wanna go over is how a Nitro is set up. And there is really no difference from an electric other than a throttle servo. So your main setup is going to be the same. You have your 3 cyclic servos on V-Bar. This back servo is 1, this front left servo is 2, this front right servo is 3, and you would plug 1, 2, and 3. Now your throttle servo is going to plug in to the ESC port. Your tail servo plugs into tail port. Now you will notice that all my ports are taken up here. And the reasoning for that is your RPM port, which is important on the Nitro since we are going to use V-Bar governor. We are running a backplate sensor. So we have a X-Guard backplate sensor, and that is my choice of governor for RPM. You could also use a magnetic pickup if you have magnets in your fan shroud. You could do it that way. Personally, the backplate sensor is the best in my opinion. Now you will also notice that we have auxiliary 1 plugged in, and that is for, of course, our onboard glow. Again, running the X-Glow. I will link everything in the description. I'm big on having onboard glow. It is very nice to flip a switch. Now our battery is going from our XT60 to 16 gauge wire, and that runs up and along, and I split my power into 3 ports. So I come off of my 16 gauge wire, solder 3 lines on, and I plug it in to 3 ports. So that way my power is split across, and I'm not just plugging a 7.4 volt light bulb into one 22 gauge servo wire. So now let's get these blades off and let's get started with the setup. The first thing we need to do is bind our model. So I'm going to plug my 2S LiPo into the helicopter, and my V-Bar is going to flash. I'm going to come down here to this little chain link, and I'm going to hit that, and it's going to search for the V-Bar that we are binding to. Now it's going to come up, it's a new 700, so we're going to click on that. We're going to let it bind and connect. The helicopter just came alive. Our throttle just went open. Now it is very important on your throttle to make sure that you disconnect the throttle servo, because you don't want it to be in a bind when we don't know exactly where it's at. So you can either take the horn off, or I know that this has been set up prior so my linkages are not in a bind, but I do recommend taking the horn off until we get to that stage. So now we are binded. So we're gonna come over here to model setup. We're gonna come down to edit model setup. First thing we are going to do is change the name. So this is going to be SAB Nitro, and then see if we can fit 580. We can't, so we'll just put SAB Nitro and then hit enter. So now we're going to select our FBL orientation. So we are face up wires rear, but you could, if you were face up wires front, face up down, but we're face up wires rear. And then if you push and hold this little selector, this will give you more, like if you were running sensors, if it was up or down, but we don't need to worry about any of that. We're just face up wires rear. We are a clockwise main rotor rotation, so we don't have to touch that. Now this little guy here is going to be your swash plate servo layout. So if you remember in the beginning of the video, I talked about 1, 2, and 3. Our swash plate type is an HR3 120 reverse. So this is our HR3. So if we move our servos now, everything should be moving on the helicopter, as you can hear all of our servos. So what we are going to do is we are going to come down here to where it says servo reverse. We are going to select that. And what we need to do is we're going to move our collective and reverse these channels until all of our servos work together. So as I move my collective up and down, you can see our servos are not going the correct direction. So we are going to reverse 1, and we're going to try it. So this looks good, but it's backwards. So when we go to negative, that's positive, as you can see on your little grip there. And then our left is left, right is left, and so that is backwards. So we are going to reverse it again, and it is backwards again. Now we're going to come back and just reverse our top one. Try that. That didn't work. So we're going to reverse top and bottom. Now when we go to positive, we got negative, left, right, back, forward. So now our swash plate is set up on our direction. So now we are just going to tap and come out of here. Now, for trim values, any of these tabs that have the little blue corners, those you push and hold. So if you tap it one time, it's going to give you an overall trim. If you back out and you push and hold, which is what we want to do, this is going to give us each individual servo. So now we're going to go from 1, 2, and 3. We're going to use our little guide. So on servo 1, we are going to look at it and we know that we need to come up. So we're going to add some. And we're going to bring this up so we are at 90 degrees, which is about right there. It's in line here. So we look pretty level and straight there. Actually, we can come down just a little bit. We're going off of this little inlet right there. That looks perfect. Now we're going to take our servo guide and we're going to do servo 2 and servo 3. So with that servo guide, we are going to look right down there and we are going to adjust servo 2 until our horn is exactly in line with that guide. So that right there looks to be about perfect. Now we're gonna take this off, we're gonna flip it to this side and do that servo. So now that we got all 3 of our servos done, set up, this is where you would level your swash plate. Now this model was already flown on another flat barless unit, so I don't need to readjust my swash plate, but I am going to check my blade pitch, and we are going to need a pitch gauge. So I got the blades out of whack just to show you. You are going to stay in this mode, and then you are going to actually adjust these linkages. This is a turnbuckle, depending on the model you are doing, but you're going to adjust your turnbuckle till you have 0. So we are staying in this mode because this is going to keep us straight 90 degrees and level. No matter what we do with the stick, it doesn't move. So now we are going to 0 our pitch gauge, and we can find a level spot on the helicopter, and we're gonna 0 it out. And then now we're gonna put our pitch gauge on our blade going over the tail boom. We are positive at 0.3, 0.4. So we are just going to adjust this turnbuckle until we get 0. And then we're gonna turn the head around, get our other blade and do the same thing. So we are both 0'd on each side. So now that we are 0'd out on both blades, our servos are 90, our swash plate is level, our linkages are done. So now we can set our positive and negative pitch. So we are going to back out, and we're going to come down here, positive and negative. So we're going to go negative, and we're going to see where we are at. We are at 13.9 degrees. So we want to set this to about 13. So we're going to move our wheel down here until we get to about 13 degrees. You see we went too far, so we were at 12.7. Give it just a little bit more, 13.1. So we're gonna take it down 1. There we go, 13 degrees. Now we're gonna go positive, and we are at 15 degrees. So we're gonna take that way down. 13 degrees, almost there. 13.4, 13.3. And we're at 13 degrees. So now we are 13 degrees positive, 13 degrees negative. I'm gonna go positive again. We can take a little bit more out. Now we're gonna go back down to negative and then go back up to positive, 13 even. So now we are perfect, positive and negative, 13 degrees. So now we're gonna come down here to where it says check. And we are going to calibrate to 8 degrees. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to tap this guy here, and we're going to adjust our up and down until we get 8 degrees. So if you can see right now, we are at 9.6. So we need to go down, and we need to get it till we are at 8 degrees. And we're about right there. And what we are doing is we are teaching the fly barless unit 8 degrees. So there we are. So we're going to be at 83. Perfect. Now we can back out. Uncheck this, and now we're going to come down to our tail servo. So you're going to check this here. Our tail servo is going to be 760, and you're going to see what you have here. So 760/500 is what we are running. And then now we are going to adjust our limits left and right. Now before we adjust our limits, we want to check 2 things. First thing we want to check is if our tail is going the proper direction. So if we give ourselves right tail, we should have right, and it is going left, left is going right. So we're going to come down here, we're going to uncheck, we want to change the direction. Now we're going to try again. Right tail, we have right, left tail, we have left. Okay, so now that is right. Next thing we need to make sure is our tail servo is 90 degrees. You can see ours is not. So I'm going to pull this horn, move it one spline, and that should get us 90. These are programmable, so I can always go in and program the servo so it is 90 degrees. Now we moved our horn over one spline. It's not 100% perfect, so I could go into my Vbar box and get this dialed in so it's 100% neutral, but it is very close. It'll do what we need it to do. So now what we are going to do is we're going to adjust our left and our right limit. And what we are going to do before that is we are going to fold our tail blades in, and we are going to check for 2 degrees of right rudder positive pitch on the tail, which is what we have. You want that top blade to be away, that bottom blade to be towards the boom. So that is our preload, mechanical preload. And now we are going to adjust the slider. So we're going to go full right, and you can see we don't have a lot of travel. Full left, and we don't have a lot of travel. So we're going to hold full right, and we are going to increase it until it about bottoms out. But we don't want it to bottom out. So I'm going to leave, that's more than enough rudder throw. I'm going to leave that much room. Now we're going to go full left while looking inside of there. We're going to increase it till we just about bottom out right there. So now left, right, left, right. Our tail is set up, no binding. That way our tail servo doesn't get hot, no humming, no binding. So that is all done. Our cyclic is done. So now we are going to move down, and we are going to go into the governor setup. Now, one important thing is it has to have pro software. So your Vbar has to have pro software if you are running Vbar governor. So if you're going to run Vbar governor, you have Vbar electric gov, external governor, Vbar nitro governor. So that is what we are using. So we're going to come down here, Vbar nitro governor, let it send its data. So now this is where we need to be, is where output setup. So we are going to select this, and we are going to go to collective control on. This is going to enable direct throttle. So as we move our stick, you can see our servo. Now, one thing to note is the carburetor has little notches. You can see those little notches right there. That one is closed all the way. In the middle is going to be half throttle. All the way to forward is open. So one thing to note, our throttle is backwards. So we need to come down, reverse throttle direction. Let's try this again now. So idle, that's fully closed. That's half throttle. Now that's down there is full throttle. Another very important thing to note is your linkage setup. So we are going to come down to right there. We want to get to that middle, which is right there. You can see that on the carburetor barrel. You see that line going up to those 3 lines on the carburetor casing. Now we're going to look at our servo and arm setup. Now again, this is a pre-done model I've already flown, so you can see my throttle servo is 90 degrees. My carburetor arm is 90 degrees. That is very, very important for proper governing of your throttle. So if yours is not, right now would be the time to leave your stick at half. There's a little hole right there inside of your throttle arm on your carburetor. You could stick like a T-pin or a small Allen in there, and you would adjust your arm so that way it is at half throttle right now, 90 degrees straight up, and then you would adjust your throttle servo 90 degrees straight up. And we want a linear throw. So we have a linear throw. We have just as much under half as we do over half. So our throttle servo is set up properly. So now we are going to set the endpoints, and we are just going to go to full throttle. We are going to go back what we just did because we exited out. So collective control, direct throttle. All right, now we're going to go to full throttle, full, and we are going to adjust this until our arm gets right to there. We're going to back it off just a tiny bit so we are not on bottoming out. We don't want that servo to bottom out. So that looks good. Now we know we don't have to adjust the low end because it is already fully closed right now. So one thing to note is after you're done setting up, check and feel that servo to make sure that it's not getting too hot. So now that that is done, our cut switch is the next thing. So we're going to select the cut switch. You're going to select your option 1, 2, 3, or buddy. I'm going to leave option 2 as my cut switch. So that part is done. Now we need to do the gear ratio. So now we are going to set up our gear setup and our pulse rate, or our poles. So non-Mikado for gear type. Gear ratio, we're going to go to ratio, and on this particular model, the SAB Raw 580 Nitro is 8.0. So we're just going to go 8.0. Now, for our pole count, since we are running a back plate, it is one pole pairs two poles. The same as a magnet pickup as well. One pole. Max RPM 4,800. So now we are done with our regular basic setup. This is completely done now. We can back out, and now we are going to come down into where we have our flight parameters. We're going to come down to governor. We're going to do a couple things here. So we're going to set our head speed. So bank 1 is going to be irrelevant on the head speed because that's going to be our direct throttle, or what we used to know as normal mode. Bank 2, we are going to set to 2,000 RPM. And bank 3, we are going to set to 2250 RPM, 2260. We're going to leave our gains alone. We're going to leave our idle alone for now. Collective add, cyclic add, collective dynamic, we're going to leave alone. We'll make a separate video on tuning a nitro governor. So we're going to come down to the bottom now. So where we want is where it says direct throttle. So we are going to click direct throttle. So right now, when you move your cyclic, your throttle servo does nothing. So as you can see, we are moving our cyclic, our collective, and our throttle servo is not doing anything. It's just stuck at 0. Closed barrel. So when we select direct bank 1, now when we move our collective and we back out of here, we flip off motor hold. Motor on. Our throttle is now connected to bank 1, but when we flip to bank 2 or 3, it's only moving to that center point. So that's where the governor is working. Again, bank 2, and that's what and that again is what we're going to go over with tuning the governor to get the best performance on the nitro. So now, bam, it is all the way to a direct throttle. So now we're back in our governor setup, and we are going to look at nitro idle. So this is where we set the idle of our engine when it is running. So now for my particular helicopter, this is my motor off.
Use 0 milliampere hours.
Auto rotation,
Use
and then motor on.
Hours. Motor on.
So now my throttle works, so you can hear it. Flip my motor off, it goes to my idling.
Motor off.
This switch here is my actual kill switch. So when I flip this switch up, this will give me 0 on the carburetor for shutting the engine off. You could set that to however you personally like it, but that is what the option was that we just went over while we were setting up the governor itself and the throttle, the direct throttle. So now nitro idle is going to be how much opening is in the carburetor. So we are going to adjust this for our bank 1 or for whatever bank that we are in, so that way when we idle, we can adjust our idle. Now you can do it here, or you can do it on a dial here. Now you don't have to keep adjusting this. If you want to put it on a dial, you can. I explained that in the turbine video. That's how I adjusted the values on the idle on the turbine, but we're just going to add value. So we're going to come up and you adjust this as it runs. So we're going to start at about 10, and then we will, after we do our first start, you can actually physically see the carb body moving right now. So right now we are at 0, and as we up it, you can see that moving. So again, we're going to start at we'll start at about 15. That looks like a good idle. You can see it right there. Just open the carburetor, and then we would adjust that as you go. And of course, that stays the exact same on bank 2 and 3, so your idle doesn't change. So now the last thing we need to set up, which is very simple, is our onboard glow. So as I showed you in the beginning, our X glow is plugged into auxiliary 1. So we are going to swipe over, we're going to come to switch assignments, and we're going to look through our switch. Now this is where you would change your motor cut switch. So to shut the engine off, you would flip through there, and if you don't know what switch it is, you can flip it and you see that moving position A, position B, and then this is where you would also reverse it. So for example, if you wanted this to be run and this to be cut the engine completely, you would just click here, click reverse. So we're going to go option 1 is what our auxiliary 1 channel is just pre-done in the Vbar. So we don't have to do nothing crazy there. We are on switch 4 for option 1. That is this switch right here for me. If you want to move it to somewhere else, you can. So we are option 4 is automatically reversed when in position A. So if we flip this switch one time here, we should hear a buzzer. That is like a siren if you lose your helicopter in a cornfield or something. I don't know. I've never used it, but that's what that's for. If we flip this switch all the way down, we should hear a constant buzzing. That is telling us that our globe is on. Now, so if we flip this on, we hit it with our starter, it has fuel, it will start. It auto times out after 30 seconds, so you don't have to worry about flipping this off after you start. It will shut off on its own, just like that. You see I didn't touch it, it shut off at auto time. If you need to restart, you flip it again, you crank it, and you start. So the onboard glow is super simple to hook up, and it is just a no-brainer on any Nitro helicopter. So our switch assignment's done. Now the last thing we need to do is get a starter, and we want to check to make sure we are getting RPM. So now I've grabbed my starter. I am using the Align starter, great starter, but we are going to be paying attention to this number right here. So of course we have our glows off. There's no fuel in the helicopter, so it will not start, but I'm going to put my starter into my starter shaft, hit the button, and see if we are reading RPM. And we are. So we are reading RPM, so that means that our backplate sensor is working, and that is a very simple sensor. You just push it up till it touches, bolt it on, our voltage is working. This helicopter hasn't been started in a while, so a bunch of fuel and oil is pouring out of the exhaust. There you guys go, how to set up a Nitro helicopter on Mikado, Vbar, Neo, or Evo. They're both the same setup, but the one thing to remember is you have to have at least Pro software in the Neo or Evo to utilize the Nitro governor and a bunch of other features, but that's the most important thing is the Nitro governor. So again, I will link the backplate sensor that I use. This is the OS55, by the way, with the power boost pipe, data servos, Vbar Neo. So I will link the backplate sensor that I'm using, the XGuard, XGlow system. They're both XGuard, great backplate, great glow driver. I will link Vbar Evo in the description and control everything that you want to do to copy this or mimic this setup. And again, this is not just for the SAB Raw 580. This setup is for all Nitro machines. So we will make a separate video going over just tuning the Vbar governor for Nitro to get the most optimized of it. If you guys don't know, I've already done a tuning video on Nitro, so I'll try to link that in the description if you haven't already seen it. But we're just gonna tune the engine, make sure it's good, it hasn't been flown in a while, then we'll go through setting up the governor so we can get the most performance out of this thing and make it fly and not bog and have a ton of power. So Nitro season is here. I'm excited to fly this thing again. So I want to thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you haven't already, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Take care and have a great day.